remember a firm network that is here and all our guests joining us today. Our partner in this event, The Nation, America's oldest weekly magazine, which has been celebrating its 150th anniversary throughout 2015, forged in the crucible of emancipation. The Nation was started by a group of young abolitionists in 1865, committed to reporting on and participating in this country's struggles to live up to its founding creed, to create a more perfect union. By extending the guarantees of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to Americans of all races. So they've been in the racial justice business for a long time, and we are proud of them joining us here today. I am an organizer at the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada Action Fund, or Plan Action. We work hard every day to make sure the voices of our immigrant community is heard in the state and throughout the United States. But I would not be here today, and this event would not be taking place if it weren't for the amazing acts of immigrants that take every single day. They stand in the public eye and risk everything by saying, I am here. I am afraid. I am not afraid. I am quite afraid right now.
You got this.
I am not afraid, and I demand to be treated with respect and dignity. My family invests in America, and America should invest in my family.
That's right.
And that is exactly what today is about. It's about the power of our voices coming together to have a conversation with the candidates seeking the highest office in this land. So thank you, welcome to everybody, and again, gracias for being here today.
Buenas tardes, mi gente. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. My name is Kika Matos. I am the Director of Immigrant Rights and Racial Justice at the Center for Community Change. And seeing all of you here warms my heart, so thank you for being here today. I'm going to be one of you moderators today, along with my brother here, Dorian Warren. Dorian, give people a wave.
Everybody.
Dorian is a renowned scholar on issues of poverty and racial justice, and a lot more. Many of you probably know this handsome man from MSNBC, where he serves as a host and executive producer of the show Nerding Out. How many of you have seen Nerding Out? Yeah.
Oh, you're very kind. The 5 of you that raised your hand, thank you.
So one of the most exciting but also heaviest responsibilities in my job is to be spokesperson for the Fair Immigration Reform Movement. FIRM, as most of you know, started about 15 years ago, and it began at a time when, if we so much as mentioned this idea of immigrants, all immigrants getting citizenship in this country, people would, in halls of power, what would people do? They would laugh us out of the room. But together, brick by brick, we built a movement. When we stood together in courage, we found we had friends. We found we had friends in the civil rights movement, friends in the labor movement, friends in the business community, and friends in communities of faith all across America. But make no mistake, thanks to the work of FIRM, there is now such a thing as the pro-immigrant vote. And it is thanks to the pro-immigrant voters in America that there is no pathway to the White House without all of these candidates paying attention to who? To us and to our families. Yeah. Our movement, this movement, has fundamentally changed the conversation in America about immigrants by putting immigrant families at the center of the conversation. And guess what? Are we done yet? Yeah. No, we are not done yet. Let me try that again. Are we done yet? Today is yet another step in changing that conversation. And our format today is pretty straightforward and simple. I'm going to shortly ask our friends at Casa in Action to introduce Governor Martin O'Malley. Governor O'Malley is then going to have about 10 minutes to lay out his vision for immigrants in America. Then Dorian and I are going to introduce the unique set of people here with us who are going to share their stories, and they're going to ask questions of the governor. The governor is going to have a total of 5 minutes on each subject, which includes time for any follow-up at Dorian's or my discretion. So let's get started, and it is my pleasure to introduce somebody who really doesn't need an introduction. He is one of the movement's most fearless, most passionate, and most committed persons who has fought really hard for our families for decades. Let's give it up for Gustavo Torres of Casa. Yeah,
Sí se puede, sí se puede, sí se puede, sí se puede. Buenas tardes. I feel a lot of energy and power in this room. I don't know why. So great to be here. So thank you, all of you. Thank you very, very much. It's my honor to introduce to you a very, very good friend. I'm so proud to call him my friend and partner in crime, Governor Martin O'Malley, who's right over there. Thank you so much, Governor O'Malley, for joining us. Very quickly, want to tell you about my governor. I'm from Maryland. He was my governor. So I need to share with you my experience with my governor for the last 12 years. Actually, he was the mayor of Baltimore before he was the governor of Maryland. And as a mayor, Mayor O'Malley, I remember that we went to a big town meeting, very similar to this one. Probably he recalled that. 300 day laborers and domestic workers. We didn't have a day labor center right over there in Baltimore. And we organized this extraordinary town meeting to convince then Mayor O'Malley to say, Mayor, are you going to create a day labor center for our community? And we thought that it's going to be very, very tough. In 2 minutes, he said yes. So that is the kind of leadership that we really needed. And that is the reason why it's so important. I'm very proud that he is going to run for President of the United States. And as a governor, he did an extraordinary work for the Latino and immigrant community in Maryland. I want to mention 2 or 3 very, very important accomplishments, and I'm very sure that he is going to describe even more. The first one, the driver license. We passed the driver license in Maryland because the leadership of the Governor O'Malley. 150,000 people already have driver license in Maryland because Governor O'Malley. Then he passed the DREAM Act, an extraordinary victory. And remember, the opposition came together against us. It went to a referendum, and Governor O'Malley, with the extraordinary leadership, we won that because he took a leadership to make sure that we accomplished that. And finally, do you remember the crisis that we faced with the kids? You know what happened? That some people say that we need to deport them. Well, Governor O'Malley called me. I remember that he called me and said, we need to resolve this crisis. And he brought a lot of people together, community-based organizations, churches, policymakers, to identify a solution to this. And right now, Maryland is the state where more unaccompanied kids live in our state, and we are very proud to welcome them because Governor O'Malley leadership. So I want that all of you welcome Governor O'Malley today. Governor O'Malley, please join us.
Oh, thank you. He's been talking like that. So thank you. Thanks very, very much. Hey, how you doing? Good to see all of you. And that is my podium, huh? Let's give it up for Gustavo Torres. Gustavo, thank you. Gustavo, thank you very, very much for your kind introduction. I'm going to come back to Gustavo in a second, but I want to thank you for the honor of being able to join you here today. Gustavo talked about the things that we did together, and I'm sure he meant it tongue in cheek. He said, my partner in crime. Compassion is not a crime. Generosity is not a crime. Goodness is not a crime. These are American values. The progress that we were able to make in Maryland because of Gustavo's leadership, because of a whole lot of people coming together, the progress that I was able to bring forward and achieve as the governor of Maryland were some of the proudest moments of my service in those 15 years, 7 of them as a mayor, 8 of them after I got demoted to the rank of governor. But they were some of the proudest moments of my public service. Together, Gustavo and I fought to include more people, more fully, in the economic, the social, and the political life of our country. And after all, isn't that really the genius of the United States of America? That in every generation, we take actions, not words, not empty promises, but actions to include more people more fully. Because we are a nation of immigrants. Whether our ancestors came from Ireland, as half of mine did, the others came from Germany, which means that I like to give orders, but I don't like to take them. Or whether our ancestors came from Mexico, or whether they immigrated here generations ago, or just decades ago. You know, the true story, my great-grandfather's name also happened to be Martin O'Malley. And like so many new American immigrants, he came here in the 1880s with absolutely no money, nothing but the clothes on his back. I know for a fact, because I pulled the census records, that his first language was not English. It was Irish, a wholly separate language. But the hopes and dreams that he had for his children and for his grandchildren were purely American. That they would be able to live here in openness and freedom where their talents could be put to the greatest use. Now, for many, many years, I have very intentionally and repeatedly used the term in my service of new Americans. New Americans. Because the genius of our country, isn't it? It's not so much about where you've come from, it's about where you're going. And the truth that we are all going there together. And today, today's new American immigrants are not the first, of course, to face the sort of ugliness and the fear, the exclusion, the xenophobia, the scapegoating of the other. Sadly, that is also a part of our experience. It is part of our American history. But the arc of our country's future, thanks to generous, good, and compassionate men and women, has been bent always towards more inclusion of more people. When my own great-grandfather came here, there were signs, and I kept one of these signs on my desk every day that I was mayor and every day that I was governor. And the sign was from the late 1800s, and it read, "Help wanted, no Irish need apply." So this sort of scapegoating and this sort of bigotry is not new. But that sign for me was a daily reminder that not only were we all once strangers in a strange land, but we're all in this together. And we have to help each other if we are going to succeed. And I suppose it's the realization of that truth that has always allowed me to see in the eyes of my new American neighbors, the eyes of great-grandparents that I never met in this life. The cause we share, you see, is the cause of human dignity. And it is one of the most powerful beliefs we share as Americans. The belief in the dignity of every single person. A belief in our own responsibility to advance the common good we share. And one of the most important of those common goods is the American dream and its truth. As governor of Maryland, I fought and worked and brought people together every day to make more real and more true the promise of the American dream. That wherever you start, but through your own hard work, you're able to get ahead. How did we do this? We did it by including more of our people. What do I mean by that? In Maryland, we didn't wait for the federal government to act. We pursued our own version of the DREAM Act to ensure that 36,000 dreamers could have access to affordable higher education. And after I signed that into law, thanks to Gustavo's good work and a whole coalition of people that were there at the bill signing, some reactionary forces in our state petitioned it to referendum, sent it to a popular vote in an effort to kill it. It was a straight yes or no vote. And in the very first poll that came out on this question, guess what? It was losing, 47 to 39. And as any of you know, if you've met dreamers, they do not have a political action committee. So we had to raise our own money to defend the referendum. But we made our case to the people of our state. We made our case that we're all in this together and that we are better if every child realizes their full potential. And guess what? When it came time for election day, we won that popular vote with 59% of the people of Maryland. You know, sometimes some people in the press, they scratch their heads when I use a term like forging a new consensus. Well, that's how it happens. You bring people together. You don't wait until the polls say it's popular and it's a slam dunk. Effective leaders are clear about their principles. They make themselves politically vulnerable in order to get important things done. The things we got done in the legislature and then more broadly in throughout the popular vote of the people of Maryland. That allowed us to do other things. In Maryland, we expanded access to driver's licenses because people need to be able to get to and from work safely and obey the rules of the road. So we passed driver's licenses for new American immigrants in our state. Would have been easy to get scared off by the politics. Would have been easy to say, yeah, boy, that's just really inconvenient right now. But we stood up for our neighbors. And it was not just a victory for Maryland's dreamers. It wasn't just a victory for the people that are affected. It was a victory for our state, for the common good that we share. And at the very start of my governor's years of service in 2008, we established a commission on new Americans to highlight the skills, the various skills that new American immigrants actually bring to our economy, that help make it go, that oftentimes skills that are not as fully utilized as they could be for the benefit of all. And that effort was helped and led by our very first state labor commissioner in my administration, a name that might be familiar to you now, Tom Perez, now our United States Labor Secretary from Maryland. I regret I have but one cabinet to give to my country. We're proud of Tom and what he's doing at the national level. We became the first state in the nation to pass a living wage. We raised the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, and 2 of our counties raised it to $12.80 an hour. We froze college tuition 4 years in a row. We did a better job than any other state at holding down the cost of college tuition. And guess what? This also helped Hispanic students earn twice as many associate's and bachelor's degrees during my service as governor as they had in the 8 years before I served as governor. We kept Maryland's unemployment rate among Hispanic workers down to one of the lowest in the nation. And we were also able to increase minority business awards to Hispanic and Latino-owned firms by 154%. And what was the result for our entire state? The highest median income in the country all through the recession, doing what's right for one another, doing what's good, doing what's compassionate, and doing what's generous is also what's best to build an American economy that works for all. And look, anyone can talk about it. Anyone can talk about it, but we actually did it. Del dicho al hecho hay mucho trecho. And in accordance with that wisdom, I am the only candidate this year running for President of the United States in either party to lay out in specific detail the actions I would take as president to bring new American families out of the shadows and into the full light of an open American society and economy and country. Now, any race is about choices, though, isn't it? And there are differences on this issue between myself and the other two individuals, Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders, who are both seeking this office. We offer, you decide. We are the candidates, and then our job is to draw the differences. So with respect, let me explain some of the differences, especially on these issues between myself and my two co-competitors for this office. I think that there is no clearer example in this race of the failed old thinking of the past on immigration than our positions today. I mean, now we are down to just 3 candidates in the Democratic primary for president. And sometimes if we wonder why it's so hard to get comprehensive immigration reform up for a vote in Congress, we need only listen to the echoes of the failed thinking of the past. And by that I mean the failed thinking and the falsehood that somehow new American immigrants take our jobs, or the equally self-defeating thinking that this is merely a constituency issue over here someplace that's a distraction from our national interest. I represent a different generation. And the generation that I represent understands that comprehensive immigration reform is in the best economic interest of the United States as a whole. True story. In 2007, when new American immigrants in New York had the opportunity for New York to do as Maryland had done and pass driver's licenses for new American immigrants so people could obey the rules of the road, get insurance, get to and from work, Secretary Clinton had her campaign call up then Governor of New York and beg him to pull the bill because it was getting in the way of her politics and her campaign. When comprehensive immigration reform was up for a vote in Congress, Senator Sanders went on Lou Dobbs' show. Are you familiar with Lou Dobbs?
Yeah.
Yes. Went on Lou Dobbs' show and said that immigrants take our jobs and depress American wages. Not only are those statements flat out wrong, they actually harm the consensus that we need to bring together in order to get things done as a country. We are not going to solve this problem with poll-tested triangulation or half-truths, nor will we solve this problem by falsely asserting that immigrants take our jobs or lower our wages. To solve this problem, we need new leadership, principled leadership, based on what's best for our country and our economy, in order for it so that it can work better for all of us. And yes, we have a growing injustice in this country that people are working harder and not being able to get ahead like we once did before. 70% of us are earning the same or less than we were just 12 years ago. But in order to fix that, you want to make wages go up? Let's get 11 million of our neighbors out of the shadow economy and onto the books of an open American economy. They're telling me to wrap up. Look, let me tell you what I would do as president. Let me tell you what I would do as president, because that's why you all invited me here. As president, I will use the full legal and executive authority of my office to safeguard and better include new American immigrants. What does that mean? It means providing deferred action not just to dreamers and their parents, but to everyone who would have been covered by the Senate's last comprehensive immigration bill as a starting point. It means undoing punitive Clinton-era policies like the 3 or 10-year bar that tears families apart. And unlike some of my fellow Democratic candidates in this race, including Secretary Clinton, who took issue with me at the very first Democratic debate for this, I say that new American immigrants should be able to apply for access and health insurance under the Affordable Care Act. And as taxpayers, they deserve the same access and the same benefits as everyone else. I also believe that it's not too much as we debate the cost of college and making college more affordable for all of our children, that we should make sure that in every state, people, regardless of their immigration status, if they pay taxes in state, they should be able to get in-state tuition. We did it in Maryland, and guess what? We have some of the highest number of PhDs per capita of any state in the union, so it's actually a good thing. And I certainly do not believe that immigrant detention is a deterrent. It is an aberration and has no place in a free democracy like ours. And to that racist, carnival barker, Donald Trump, I believe that all of us need to stand up and stand together and say that the enduring symbol of our nation is not the barbed wire fence, it is the Statue of Liberty. New American immigrants do not, in fact, make the rest of us poorer. They make our country stronger and better. They are more willing to start businesses than others. And that's been proven time and time again. This is not an either-or choice, I guess, is what the old thinking would have us believe. We are not some small zero-sum country where because others are succeeding, that means we're doing worse. The truth of the matter is, as the great Frederick Douglass said, we are one. And our cause is one. And we must help each other if we are going to succeed. America is made better in every generation by new American immigrants. Let me close now with this final story. All of us remember the scene last year when refugee children were fleeing for their lives over deserts and risking death and being muled and then abused as they fled the death gangs of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. When children arrive on our doorstep, fleeing starvation or death gangs, we do not turn our backs on them as a people. Or worse, we should not pen them up behind chain-link fences for months and months on end. In conditions that we are more accustomed to seeing at our local humane society than are befitting of a humane country that believes in the dignity of every individual. Now, some governors, when that was happening, referred to these children, mind you, as if they were a swarm of jackrabbits. I remember one governor even saying, we got to make sure we round the rascals up. That's not how we behaved in Maryland. Some of my political advisors say, I like what you're doing, but I don't think it's going to work out in public opinion. I said, actually, I know it will. And what's more, I don't care about the polls. I care about these kids. And I called on faith leaders to come together so that we could care for as many refugees as we could. And we cared for them not in congregate living centers, not behind chain link fence, but in foster homes. And true story, we accommodated more kids, and Gustavo remembers this, pulled together a huge coalition. You were there in the governor's office when we pulled people together. We accommodated more kids from Central America per capita than any other state in the union. 2 months later, my wife Katie and I were at an open house, shaking hands in front of the Christmas tree, holiday open house, and all these people were streaming in for the open house. And this man comes up to me, and with him is a 13-year-old boy. And he says, Governor O'Malley, this is Emmanuel. And he's one of those Central American kids who was able to come here and stay here and is safe today because of what you did. And I wanted him to meet you. And no sooner had that kid shaken my hand for just a split second than he broke off and wrapped me in an embrace, the likes of which I will never, ever forget. Do you want to talk to people who believe very firmly and very fiercely and with great love and passion in the American dream and all things that are possible in the United States of America? Talk to new American immigrants. Talk to Emmanuel. Everyone who has risked their lives to get here believes in the American dream. I believe in it as well. And I believe that you believe that it's worth fighting for, it is worth saving, it is worth passing on to our children in better condition than we received it ourselves. I need your help. I am in this to win this. Our country's future is a more compassionate and a more generous future. And together, we have the freedom to make it real for all of our people. Thanks very, very much. Thank you. Thanks for all your work. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor O'Malley.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Great to
Sorry
be with
I went
you.
overtime.
Thanks for coming. This is now the question.
You all were a lot
part of
nicer
the
than
panel.
Anderson Cooper, too, on going overtime. I want to thank you for that.
Thank you for your passion, of course. I think you saw some of the love in this room for you. You've had some practice at this. I saw you in South Carolina Friday night with Rachel Maddow. We're not pretending to be Rachel Maddow in any way, but we have some even stronger questioners for you. So remember, there's 5 minutes here, including moderator follow-ups to the questions. We're going to start first with Julianne Hing from The Nation magazine, who has a question for you.
Hi, Governor O'Malley. You've been, as we just heard, a vocal proponent of pro-immigrant policy and comprehensive immigration reform. Would you support a comprehensive immigration reform bill like the one the Senate passed in 2013? And in particular, I mean the enforcement provisions in it, which would require a series of security triggers to be in place before undocumented immigrants could take advantage of the legalization process.
Yeah, I referenced the Senate bill in my remarks, mostly as a reference point to the additional extension of executive relief that I would provide. I think that the triggers, there were very good things in that bill, many of the aspects, but some of them that I think didn't make a lot of sense was the triggers. So I'm not a big fan of the trigger. It looked like some sort of cover that was part of a bipartisan compromise to give cover to, perhaps it was thought, to Republican congresspeople in order to vote for it. And sometimes that's the nature of compromise, but I would, in my proposals, I don't have those triggers there. And I have put forward what Jorge Ramos called the most comprehensive and progressive immigration proposal of any candidate for president, but I did not have those triggers in my proposal.
So, Governor, one of the good things about the Senate bill was that it provided a path to citizenship. One of the bad things was that there was a provision for a set-aside of $25 billion to go into border enforcement. And there was a lot of concern from folks in this room and outside of the room that, in essence, $25 billion investment in border enforcement really would have resulted in the all-out militarization of the border. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are around that particular provision.
Yeah, I was reading that as I was flying in today. Our nation needs to do a much better job, especially within our own hemisphere, of identifying threats like failing nation states before they touch off a refugee crisis like the one we saw when Syria failed and we had this massive refugee crisis. It struck me in looking at that number that some of those dollars might be put to much better use by doing things that would actually work to reinforce rule of law and improve conditions in Central American countries, sustainable development, better and options for young people. I mean, those are, so look, I understand we must, and we have a right and we should defend our borders, but we are not a fortress nation. And I mean, listening to some of the Republican candidates for president, you think they were auditioning for fencing contractor or something, you know, and I mean, they're all talking about these contrived ideas when you consider the fact that net immigration from Mexico is, I think, at about zero right now. So they're creating these fanciful images to address a problem that's not exactly there right now. I think some of those dollars would be much better used in sustainable development within our own hemisphere to reduce the impact of these drug gangs that oftentimes receive more in extortion payments. I mean, businesses pay more to a lot of the drug gangs, I learned in meeting with 25 mayors in El Salvador last year. They told me that 70% of their businesses pay more in extortion payments than they do to their own country in taxes to defend the rule of law. So I think some of those dollars would be better directed towards those efforts. Thank you. You okay back there?
Our next question comes from Ivania Castillo. Ivania, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ivania Castillo. I'm a voluntary from Casa en Action, and I represent more than 80,000 members from Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Virginia and Pennsylvania. I came to this country in 1980 during the civil war in my country, El Salvador. My mom got kidnapped, and she decided to bring me and my 3 sisters to this country to save our life and to have a better future. In 1986, I became a resident of this country. In 1997, I became a U.S. citizen. Like many immigrants in this country, I have worked very hard. My first job was breaking floor in a kitchen, you know, breaking in a construction kitchen floors. And I worked during the weekend, cleaning houses, cleaning office in the evening, and going to school during the daytime. In 2000, I became a nursing assistant, taking care of the elderly and working with hospice patients in the last moments of their life. For more than 20 years, I've been working with the community, fighting for immigration reform, for the executive action, and for immigrants in this country. I want the president, the next president who sits in the White House, to pass an immigration reform, because President Obama passed the executive order, and that will benefit my daughter-in-law who's an immigrant. She will benefit from DAPA. She's the mother of my grandson, Gianni. He's 2 years old, and we are afraid that she can be deported any moment. So we're hoping that you know that the next president will pass an immigration reform. I just want to say to you, sir, that you are the candidate. And to all the candidates, not only to the Republicans, but to the Democrats, that it's very important that you think about more than 11 human beings in this country who are suffering every day of their life. They don't have a paper. So I'm asking for them to think about their future and not the suffer they're causing to our people. And I just want to say thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Governor, I think the question on the table here is, what would you do to pass comprehensive immigration reform, and particularly to make sure that new American immigrants have access to the benefits?
Yeah, I put out
social benefits, health care, et cetera.
Right. I have I'm waging this campaign. The beginning of it is actually this campaign. I believe that how you campaign determines how you govern. One can't claim to have a mandate for change if you're afraid to talk about the change you hope to implement while you're running. And so I put out 15 strategic goals to rebuild the truth of the American dream we share so that we get wages to go up again for everyone in our country. And one of those goals is to pass comprehensive immigration reform. It's not some little position paper that I did over here or that I rolled out at the annual meeting of CASA. It is something that I put front and center of 15 actions that we need to take as a people to get wages to go up. There are some others as well, you know, raising the minimum wage, making it easier for people to join labor unions and bargain collectively for better wages because that helps all of us, cutting gun violence and deaths from guns in half in our country, eradicating childhood hunger. But the 15 of them together are a constellation of actions we can take that will actually make our country work better for all of us. So I intend to make the argument that immigration reform is not a constituency issue. It is not a sort of do a trick, get a cracker, or do a trick, get a vote sort of thing. It is in the best interest of us, you, period, S, period, the United States of America. I intend to, studies have said that the wages for, average wages for all Americans would go up by $250 a year simply by passing comprehensive immigration reform. And so I intend to put together the votes necessary to get this done.
So let me follow up on this point. So let's pretend it's January 2017, and I'm addressing you as President O'Malley. How are you going to bring the Republican House along with you to pass comprehensive immigration reform?
It's very interesting to me that even though you and I would probably agree that we won't be here forever, it's amazing how many Americans are ready to believe that this Republican Congress is going to be with us forever. And it won't be. The only thing inevitable in life, I mean, is change. So we've been through really divided and polarized times before. The question for us is, which of these three candidates in the Democratic Party is most likely to pull us through these divided times? Will we get through these divided times with the sort of old way of looking at immigration that says, as Senator Sanders has, that it's, immigrants hurt our wages? Will we get through it with the sort of triangulation and cautious approach of Secretary Clinton, who couldn't even allow her state to do driver's licenses when it was a political risk? Or will we get there with new leadership that's not part of that divided, polarized, ideological past? I've never said as an executive that all Republicans are my enemy. If I did, I wouldn't have gotten a lot of things done in Maryland that we got done. And that's what you learn as a mayor, as an executive. It's a different combination of votes all the time. It was a different if it weren't for some Republican votes, we would not have been able to repeal the death penalty in Maryland. If it weren't for some Republican votes, we wouldn't have been able to pass marriage equality. So I intend to work at this, and I also intend to be a strong party leader, which means making sure that we don't allow our Democratic governors to get wiped out on the eve of redistricting, and then we get saddled with an unrepresentative House of Representatives. So look, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do know this. As an executive, you have to call legislators all the time, and you have to be on a full court press on every issue in order to have the votes you need when it comes time for the really, really tough issue.
Really quickly, let me ask you this. So you wouldn't, of course, call Republicans your enemy, but let's say Speaker Ryan calls you his enemy in January 2017. Would you be willing to use executive authority to ensure that immigrants have access to social benefits, to health care, to Social Security, et cetera?
Oh, yes. I mean, in fact, I put out a comprehensive immigration reform proposal 2 months ago. And in fact, in there, I committed to going much further than the president's gone with deferred action and DAPA, parents of U.S. citizens, parents of those to whom DACA has applied. And so I intend to go to the fullest on executive action in order to cover as many individuals as I can as we work towards a full pathway for citizenship for all.
Great. Thank you, Governor.
Sure. And look, and I am also committed to health care and allowing people, if they pay taxes in a state, they should be able to apply for the health benefits under the Affordable Care Act. Secretary Clinton disagrees with me on that. She disagreed at the debate the other night, and I might point out she won't be here with you today.
Ooh.
So we're going to continue on this theme of executive authority, and I want to pass the mic off to Gustavo Velasco from Nevada, who's going to ask you a question about executive authority and enforcement.
Hi, my name is Gustavo Velasco, and I am a DACA recipient. And I can tell you the big difference that has made into my life. I can now not worry about looking over my shoulder when a cop comes around or when an immigration authority comes around. I came to the United States when I was 14 years old with my mother, Maria. We have been residing in the state of Nevada ever since we left Mexico, and I call Nevada home. My story is similar to those of any immigrants that just want to better their future and better their family's quality of life. I went to school and received an Associate of Culinary Arts from Truckee Meadows Community College. Now I co-host a morning show called Buen Dia Reno, where I have a cooking segment. I love what I do. At a very young age, I learned the values of family importance and the ties that this has to my well-being and my mental well-being. It was very hard separating from my wonderful family in Mexico, to which I have not seen in 16 years. It's very hard. I love them dearly and I miss them. I feel as though the distance from our relatives has put a tremendous burden on us, but we have done the best that we can to thrive in this beautiful country. My mom is not as fortunate as I am, because even though she pays taxes and is a wonderful woman that gives a lot to the community, she still lives in fear of getting deported. She doesn't feel safe. I don't feel safe that she will get deported. She's at a very high risk, and she qualifies for DAPA, because I have a little young sister that is a U.S. citizen. However, DAPA has been put in the back burner, and it's been stuck in the courts. And therefore, my mom as well. And I don't think anybody of our moms deserves to be there. We have fought hard for policies like DACA and DAPA to keep the immigrant families together, and are very extremely disappointed to see that these measures are held up in the courts. If elected governor, how would you use your executive authority to make sure that every tool is at your disposal is used to keep the families like mine together? And I know you said that there's no room previously for incarceration of immigrants. So my question to this is, how will you deal with the aggressive enforcement leading to the detaining, incarcerating, and deporting of unprecedented numbers of immigrants?
Thank you. I believe that the president's executive authority, while it's challenged currently in the courts, is going to ultimately be upheld. And I'm a lawyer by training, but I talk to a lot of lawyers as well. And I think if for some reason there's a holdup in it, and it requires that the rules be promulgated a second time, I intend to do that as president. Look, the executive authority is the prosecutorial authority, and I believe that we have to stop these sort of mindless deportations that are being done on a more massive scale than we've ever seen, and without a public safety purpose. And sometimes in these big organizations, one of the things you learn as a governor and a mayor is you can't always trust the information that you receive from your top cabinet members, because oftentimes by the time the information reaches them, it's no longer accurate compared to the ground truth on the ground. And I had this same experience with ICE. As governor, we had to break with ICE. They assured us, we're not putting detainers into you at the Baltimore City Jail, which the state of Maryland ran, unless there's a clear public safety reason and imperative. Well, we looked at all of the cases, and that just wasn't so. So we had to go a different direction and adopt, as many states and many cities have, our own criteria for those sorts of detainers. But I would like to believe that perhaps people thought that by being tough on deportations, it would bring Republican members of Congress to the table. If that were true, they would have come to the table 6 years ago. So we're as tough as you want us to be and as mindless as you want us to be, and we break up as many families as you would like us to break up, is a reason why you should deal reasonably with us. I don't think that argument's working very well. So I think we need to go in a different direction. I think it hurts the United States when we break up families. And that's true in whatever the context is. It hurts families. And to do so without any public safety reason whatsoever, I think hurts us and is expensive and does not serve the best interests of the United States. So I intend to make the economic argument that this is good for comprehensive immigration reform is one of the main ways we can get wages to go up again for all Americans. And that's the argument that I think ultimately wins. And in the meantime, I don't think we should be breaking up families. I think we're stronger as a country when we do the things that actually keep families together. Thank you.
So, Governor, talking about broken promises, we have met with candidates in the past, and many people in this room will tell you that we have had promises made to us and we have had our hearts broken, and there are many people in this room who have had loved ones being deported. And so my question to you is, if you were elected president, would you commit to making comprehensive immigration reform a priority during your first 100 days in office?
I've actually done it before then.
Okay.
I mean, there are not massive numbers of Latino votes to be had in Iowa or New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And I talk about comprehensive immigration reform as something important for our country every day that I jump on the chair and give talks across Iowa or New Hampshire. And I will absolutely make it and it is going to be one of the key actions that we need to take as a nation to get wages to go up rather than down. And look, I know the cynicism, I know the heartbreak, I know the sense that we have that if the politicians didn't deliver when they said it at an election, they must not have meant it to begin with. Mm-hmm. I understand all of that. And I plan to take action in the first 100 days that will be very strong and very affirmative. I plan to get a bill introduced in the first 100 days. And I don't have a magic wand, nor do I have a crystal ball. But if you look at my history, as Gustavo can vouch for, I am relentless. And I never give up. And many of the things that I'm able to point to as progressive results, I had to go at 2 or 3 times before we got them. But I don't give up. So, and my heart is, I have an immigrant's heart. I understand the American immigrant experience. It's something very dear to me. And I think that if you look at, and so anyway, I will get it done. I am going to throw all my energy I possibly can into getting it done. And I don't say that with any illusions as to how difficult it is. Mm-hmm. And it may well be that we might have to keep working it until we get a more reasonable Congress, until we elect some more governors. And it could well be that after the next election, depending on the mandate and depending on how it rolls and depending on turnout, it could be that we have wind in our sails in the very opening days of the Congress. So look, if we all knew how this would turn out, it wouldn't be so exciting. We have to work with within this process. Democracy can be very frustrating, but it's the best form of government on the earth.
Thank you. We have one last question, and that is from Adonis Flores. Thank you, Adonis.
Good afternoon, Governor O'Malley. I am Adonis Flores, and I am also a DACA recipient. I am a young professional. I am a gay dreamer, and I am a student at Wayne State University School of Business Administration. And like most immigrants, I have an entrepreneurial spirit. I aspire of creating new businesses in Detroit that will bring many new jobs to Michigan. And although I was born in Mexico, I have lived in Detroit since I was 8 years old. And I am very proud of the Motor City, and I am also very proud of being a new American immigrant.
Like most immigrant families, my family is also a family with mixed immigration status. Some of us are undocumented, others are DACA recipients like myself, others legal permanent residents, and others are American citizens, some by birth, and some new Americans, like my grandmother, who's 69 years old, and she just became a naturalized U.S. citizen, and will be voting. And she will be voting for the first time in this election.
Cool.
Nice.
Like every immigrant,
I'm sorry, before we clap for that, is she a Democrat?
she's very, very progressive.
Good, good. Let's clap for
Good
that.
answer. Good answer.
Like every immigrant, I have experienced the barriers that our current immigration system is putting on new American immigrants, regardless of status or how long we've been living in the U.S. I have seen firsthand how these barriers keep immigrants in poverty and prevent us from starting new businesses and buying homes and making our economy grow. This is why I am very invested in efforts to pass an immigration reform bill that keeps families together and has a pathway to citizenship. But despite the latest racist attacks on immigrants and the blocked comprehensive immigration reform bill, I have hope in the good hearts of the American people, and I also hope of one day going from becoming a new American immigrant to becoming a new American citizen. Due to these reasons, many immigrant families like us lived in impoverished communities like Flint, Detroit, Baltimore. And despite these challenges, we have great dreams of uplifting our communities from poverty because we love our cities and we have great respect for our neighbors. We see great potential in the amazing people that live among us in our communities. And along with our neighbors, together we hope to lift our communities, and we work very hard to lift our communities from poverty. Unfortunately, every day, more schools get closed, more jobs are taken out of our communities, and more resources are taken out of our communities. Our communities have suffered from decades of disinvestment and discrimination, and the unemployment rate among the poor is 37%. More than 3 million people are looking for work. Governor O'Malley, you mentioned that as mayor, you helped to create the Labor Day Center, and you also mentioned about your great-grandfather who lived in a period when there were signs posted that said, "Help wanted, no Irish need apply." If elected president, will you support substantial new investment to create jobs for every low-income resident in our communities and commit to a goal of cutting the unemployment rate in our communities in half?
Yes. The answer to that is yes. And on let me talk about a couple of things. Now, Baltimore actually didn't receive many Latino and Hispanic residents until we started turning around our crime problem right around 2001, 2002. And prior to that, for 30 years, we suffered one of the biggest population losses, bigger than Detroit actually, in percentage of people. While I was mayor, though, as we started making our city safer, as we started rebuilding, as private investment started coming back to a city that was made cleaner, healthier, and safer, we did start seeing an uptick in new residents who are Latino and Hispanic. And in fact, we marketed a program to help encourage people to buy their first home in Baltimore. And now we actually have a much more thriving and in keeping with that port city of ours. And the city's growing in population, which is a very good thing. There is a growing economic injustice in our country that threatens to tear us apart. For all of the good we did in Baltimore, I was not able to make her immune from setbacks. And the hard truth of our times is this, and they're both true. It's not an either-or proposition. Our country's doing better. President Obama made the tough decisions to get our economy to grow again, and now we've created more jobs every month than we've lost for 68 months in a row. That's some sort of modern time record. That's no small feat. So our country's doing better, but unemployment's higher today in the city of Baltimore than it was 8 years ago. It's higher in Los Angeles than it was 8 years ago. It's higher in Philadelphia. It's higher in Chicago, the president's hometown, for all of the good things that he's done. So why is this recovery taking so long? In part because the recession was so deep, but also in part because we have yet to do the sort of things that we must to address the structural unemployment that, if left to fester, is just going to create even more unemployment. So this week I will be putting out an agenda for American cities. And it has not been probably since Jimmy Carter that we have had an agenda for American cities. And the three major components of it are all related to employment. One is investments in mass transit. The second is affordable workforce housing, which will also need to be constructed. And the third is making our cities the cutting edge and the leading edge in the movement to a very intentional movement to a 100% clean electric grid. And that's going to require a whole lot of work in our cities and retrofitting of buildings in the very places where the greatest energy is used. And in the course of that, in the course of making universal service a national option for every kid, I do believe that we can cut unemployment in half, even in some places where it is structurally very, very tough and has grown. There is no progress without a job. And there are some jobs that we are only able to create if we make the investment we used to make as Americans in our own country, and especially in our cities, which are doing a lot better than they were, notwithstanding that lack of investment.
Governor O'Malley, let me ask you a follow-up to this question. This is exciting, this plan on investing in American cities. And since you haven't been afraid to draw contrast with your two rivals here, I want to bring up Secretary Clinton's proposal. I think she's been calling it a New Deal, that would invest in high-poverty communities and communities where particularly workers of color, African-American immigrant workers have been excluded from the labor market. I've personally written about something similar in terms of investments. The number that I've come up with is $200 billion a year from federal resources. I'm curious if you can say how much you think your plan will be necessary to implement your plan and how it will really, really tackle the issue of unemployment and disinvestment, particularly in communities of color, of immigrant workers, of African-American workers.
Yeah, I've had a lot of experience wrestling with these issues, but there is no mayor or any governor that can solve this problem by him or herself. So it will require an investment, but not to make these investments as much more expensive long-term. Right. I mean, that's the truth. And no people ever cut their way to prosperity or gave their children a better future by making their country weaker. It just doesn't hold. You won't find an example of that anywhere in history. And so stay tuned. I'm not going to itemize today, and I apologize for being restrained in my messaging. But this week I will be rolling out an agenda for American cities. It will be specific. There are programs that work. We're just not doing them at large enough of a scale to make an impact. And actually, credit to President Clinton, the empowerment zones worked. The things that I did every year as governor to actually increase summer jobs and make sure we had summer jobs. Sadly, the governor who followed me cut summer jobs. So the empowerment zones worked. The youth opportunity centers worked. We have to be very intentional about where we deploy our resources to get better results. And the good news is the place where we have the greatest unemployment is also the place where we have the greatest potential and the greatest need for economic investments. They both go together. It's right in front of us. If you've been a mayor, you can see that.
So you heard it here first, a preview of an agenda for American cities.
A new agenda for America's cities. Si se puede.
All right. So this marks the end of our program for today. Let's give Governor Martin O'Malley a round of applause for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Back at you.
And a round of applause for all the leaders who joined us today to ask questions.
Up there in New York? No? you didn't. I saw a bunch of you people when I was up there. Very pleasure to meet you. You spoke very well.
Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere.
We got even more surprises coming, so stay put.
I'm sorry, let me get off so you can go all the way.
We'll have you exit this way.
See you. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Great
you.
being with you.
Thank you, Governor. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot.
So, you know, a firm would not be firm if we didn't have somebody close out this session in the typical firm way. So to close us out, I am humbled to introduce you to the